Today, I want to delve in a little bit deeper into why I'm now incorporating more plant foods into my diet, eating a more diversified diet, as opposed to what I was promoting before, which is more of like a mono diet based around very few foods and even a fruitarian diet at times. I want to talk about that transition, why I've changed my mind, what's happened, why am I looking at it a little bit differently now, and perhaps give you some ideas about why you might consider doing the same. I was promoting for years, as you know, a mono fruit diet. Simple, just fruit, one fruit at a time until when you're hungry, until you're satisfied. Here's the thing, I still believe that this is to a large extent ideal if the foods that you are eating are top notch. And if the foods that you are eating are grown in a natural environment with good soil, etc. And if you're eating a wide variety of those foods, tropical fruits, okay? If you're in the tropics, you don't have to live in the wild, but if you're in the tropics and you have access to lots of different seasonal fruits over time, and your diet is varied, and you're eating different plants, different greens, and honestly, ideally speaking, if you're living like a bonobo or something like that, or a chimp, you would also be eating some termites, living termites. You would also be getting a lot of soil into your mouth, traces of it anyway, throughout the day, which would give you bacteria and feed you B12 and perhaps K2, different vitamins, minerals. You'll be having a very diverse diet, even though when you're hungry, and if you look at chimpanzees and bonobos, when they're hungry, they just pretty much sit down and eat one fruit until they're satisfied, sure. But over the course of a day, or especially over the course of a year, they are visiting a lot of different types of foods, or especially types of fruit, types of greens, types of plants. And my diet here in Europe, and probably if you're watching this from America or Australia or Europe or anywhere outside of the deep tropics, essentially, maybe some of you are in the tropics, which makes you lucky from a nutrition perspective. But since most of us are not in that situation, our diet is not the way I just described. Our diet or my diet particularly, is more based around some staple foods like potatoes, sweet potatoes, bananas, a lot of bananas. Check out my little banana book there. Good little plug. Bananas, and there are only a few of the fruits. This is my experience. There's only a few of the fruits in Europe, for example, in Norway, that are viable as food. Right? You go to the supermarket, there's like tons of fruit, apples, pears, grapes, melons, bananas. Very few of them fulfill your caloric needs or satisfy as well. For me, like apples, they just do not feel very well in the stomach. They're usually too sour, they're picked too early, and nutritionally they don't look to be ideal for human nutrition. They're not a tropical fruit. The fruit is just, the quality is too low, I'm not enjoying eating it. Bananas seem to be the only fruit that I'm enjoying in my life, and that sort of delivers the calories and consistent and etc. But the downside of eating a vegan or particularly a fruit heavy diet in Europe or outside of the tropics is that you do tend to get into a fairly narrow diet in terms of like the foods you're eating. Most fruit-based vegans, high-carb vegans, are relying very heavily on bananas, sweet potatoes, maybe rice for some. If you're eating only fruit, typically bananas and dates, and maybe oranges, they typically make up like a huge part of the diet. That's not ideal, I think. I think naturally, a more diverse diet is better, and I'll tell you why I think that. If you're buying stock, or if you're trading, investing money, trading and trying to make money by investment. Everyone knows that if you put all your money on one stock, it's very risky, right? You might be lucky, maybe it turns out that stock just soars and you make so much money, right? Maybe, could happen. But statistically, it's maybe more likely that that's not going to happen, and that you're more likely to make money if you spread your bets, so to speak, Put money on lots of different stocks that you find likely to grow. And by doing that, by diversifying your portfolio, which is what it's called, you are also increasing your chances of making money on average at all times. If you're putting all your money on one stock, that's only going to be successful if you have a lot of information about that one stock. You know that it's going to grow. Of course, to the extent that, you know, if you're doing inside trading and stuff, like you actually, you know it's going to grow, so you invest, and then that's illegal, right? So the point here is, if you know that the foods you're eating, let's suppose what I'm typically eating a lot of, bananas, sweet potatoes, those are like the majority of my calories are coming from those two foods. If I know that they are excellent foods containing almost everything I need, then fine, okay? But here's the thing, I don't know that. No one knows that. In fact, you know, nutritional science is actually, to some extent, still in its infancy. We're still learning a lot. We still have a long way to go in terms of understanding all the nutrients, finding all the nutrients, seeing how they interact, etc. So if you're sort of gambling with trying to just eat a few different foods, hoping that they will match, and you look at Chronometer and you try to mix and match and make everything like, okay, just a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and now you're like, okay, this seems to be good, I'm hitting all the targets. Well, what about all those nutrients that you don't know about, that we haven't found yet, or all the different things that we have found but we don't think it's necessary or important, or the different combinations of nutrients that are important? All these things mean that you're essentially putting all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. And it might be better to just, in a sense, almost blindly, not completely blindly, but a little bit, spreading your bets out by just including more foods, more types of foods. Of course, you don't want to go all the way out. Like if you're starting to include like animal foods and Oreo cookies and all these different, butter and all various foods that, anything that exists basically, well, that might not be the best idea. Just like if you're betting on the different stocks, or if you're investing, you wouldn't just like blindly invest in everything. You sort of have an idea that these types of stock, well, these are not probably the best, these are probably better. Well, in that sense, I can look again at our anatomy, our physiology as a frugivore, and I can say, you know what? It looks like we're frugivores. We're plant eaters predominantly. Okay, the chimps, they eat a little bit of meat, but they're probably doing that just to survive maybe in the dry season when there's not enough fruit around. Would they prefer to eat fruit instead? Maybe. But then again, they're another species. Maybe they are supposed to do it a little bit. Maybe they have adapted to that. Maybe us humans, we haven't, maybe. Or maybe we would eat some termites, as I've mentioned, which technically is an animal food. And that would give us certain nutrients. And yeah, we do adapt. But predominantly speaking, we are plant eaters. We're frugivores, which is a type of omnivore. And so essentially what I'm saying is that I've been a little arrogant. And I think we're all a little arrogant when we're saying, this is all you need. I know it. You don't need any of that. No, any of that. This is all you need. And it's fine. You don't have to eat any other foods. And like all year round, 90% of your calories can come from bananas and sweet potatoes. That is totally fine. I don't think that's a good idea, for obvious reasons that I've just explained. Now the challenge is, of course, that you do need calories. And as a calorie source that is still very nutritious, bananas and sweet potatoes, for example, are very easy to find and sustainable and taste amazing too. And the reason I'm eating them is because that's what I can get here in Europe. And if I was in tropics, I would eat lots of other fruits like jackfruit and cempedak and mangoes and cherimoyas and that sort of thing. But because I don't have those, I'm choosing these foods instead. So they still have a part to play. So a good way to diversify then is to introduce small amounts, I would say, of other foods and larger amounts of certain green foods. So what I'm currently doing now to diversify my diet, I'm eating a little nuts, right? A few nuts every day. Just not that much, but a little bit. Increases my fat intake a tad. which I think is good. Too low fat is not ideal. And it's almost like a supplement, giving me certain nutrients in a bit more of a concentrated fashion. I'm eating, with my dinner, I'm introducing some more greens that I cook or that I don't cook. I eat lettuce and salad with every meal, in every dinner meal anyway. I put blueberries in my smoothie. I chop up like half an apple or half a pear. I just put that in as well. Sometimes I might snack on some grapes or whatever, although I don't make a big meal of it because it just doesn't digest well for me to eat a big meal of grapes. But maybe there's something in the grapes which would be beneficial. So again, I'm just introducing them, just diversifying my diet. And overall, you could say that my diet has changed from being 30% this food, 30% that food, 30% this food, and 10% of that food, to being more like 60% these two foods, bananas and sweet potatoes typically, and then a bunch of other stuff, just like a bunch. Spreading it out, diversifying it as much as possible within the realm of what I do consider healthy. Just like if you're investing, you're not spreading it everywhere. You have your niche, you have you have those stocks that you think are good and those that you don't think are very good to invest in. Same here. I'm not investing in butter and meat and dairy because I don't think that, although there are nutrients in those foods that can even be beneficial for humans, I think if we need those, we would get it from other sources, or we should be getting them from other sources, like B12. I made a video about B12 recently. You can check that out here. We should be getting B12 from a supplement, not from meat. Just because there's B12 in meat doesn't mean that we should be eating meat, because there's other things that's coming along with that B12. Okay, so it's better to get that pure B12, in my opinion. So just because there are nutrients in these foods, don't mean that we should be eating them. So I'm excluding those foods, and also from an ethical perspective, my ethics, I want to be vegan. I don't want to eat those foods. And I don't eat termites because I don't have access to them. I don't know if I would if I did have access. It's an ethical dilemma, I guess. But because I don't eat them, I feel like I need to make up for that a little bit. So I do take a K2 supplement. I do take a B12 supplement. I take a zinc supplement. I supplement with protein powder. And as I said, I up my fat intake a little bit with those nuts and seeds. So I'm, at the same time as I'm looking at diet and just going like, this is what I need, this is how I'm going to get it in terms of nutrients, I'm also going a little bit like, well, in addition to that, I'm also just going to take a bunch of this and a bunch of that and mix and match it a little bit and diversify it a little bit and get more into that. I guess the standard recommendation is always saying eat a well-balanced, varied diet. And of course, it's sort of ridiculous to say that because no animal in nature balances nutrients. But then again, they're also probably living in a more optimal environment typically. Otherwise, they would die out because they're not intelligent enough to make adaptations to survive in an environment less than ideal. Humans, though, we can survive anywhere, and we sort of start eating foods that we're not supposed to eat in order to survive, and it sort of gets very messy when it comes to human history. So we humans, we do mix and match a little bit, and I think it is a good idea to look at blood tests. It is a good idea to look at chronometer.com, analyze your nutrition intake and mix and match it. But at the same time, I think it's also good to just say we're plant eaters, we're fruit eaters. So in order to be safe and healthy, we should probably diversify our diet and just eat a bunch of fruit, eat a bunch of vegetables, some nuts and seeds, keep the fat intake fairly low but not too low, keep the protein intake. I don't think you can go too high actually with protein, honestly, but if you go 15% fat calories, 15% protein and 70% carbs, I think you are golden. And that's what I'm doing right now. Long video, a big topic. Moral of the story is very simple. Just eat a varied diet. That's what we would do in nature. We would eat a varied diet. And because we're not having access to those top-notch tropical fruits that we should be as a tropical frugivore, we got to do the best we can and just take a little bit of what we have and mix and match it and hope that the nutrients are coming in and we're able to get what we need from what we're eating. Of course, the majority of our foods is still be coming from fruit, ideally. Bananas are a great source of calories and nutrients. Sweet potatoes are a good substitute if you're not able to find excellent fruit. You can cook up some sweet potatoes. They have a good profile, very similar to fruit. And then you mix and match with some other fruits in addition to that, and some supplements as well. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Give me a thumbs up if you liked the video. And let me know in the comments what you think. Bye.